We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I'll give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The average mortgage holder is already paying around $21,000 more each year in interest under Labor. Today, Australians anxiously await the RBA's announcement on interest rates. The Prime Minister promised Australians we had, quote, turned the corner on inflation and that his government had it, quote, under control. Countless economists and each of the big four banks predict that rates will rise even further today and this year. Government spending is fuelling this mortgage pain. When will the Treasurer's reckless spending end, Prime Minister?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Higher inflation and bigger deficits.
Order. Prime Minister will pause. Order. The Minister for Social Services. Order. The Minister on my right will cease objecting. I'd like to hear from the Manager of Opposition Business.
Point of order. Speaker, you have been consistent for this whole parliament that it is out of order and disorderly to yell out time when either a minister is finishing their answer and you've extended their time, or a questioner is running a little bit long on their time, and several members were yelling time in defiance of your ruling. In direct defiance.
Order. Order. I thank the manager. Yeah. I thank the manager. Order. I thank the manager. It will assist the House greatly if everyone could stick to the time limits in the first principle. But in that instance, people will be warned or they won't be here to hear the answer. You know it works both ways, and the Leader of the Opposition was well over time with her question, but I have been generous and to ensure that every question is allowed. I'd like the same respect shown on both sides. We'll start on the right foot. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. And I do encourage my people to not yell out time. There's enough behind her doing that at the moment. When we were elected,
will cease interjecting.
Inflation had a 6 in front of it. Yep. It's now got a 3 in front of it. We turned 2 budget deficits into 2 budget surpluses, and we used them to pay down debt. Just part of what we're doing for responsible economic management. And as the Reserve Bank has said, the budget is not the main game when it comes to inflation. At the same time that we have got inflation down, wages are up and unemployment is low compared with what we inherited. Now, we'll continue to understand that there are real cost of living pressures on Australians, and that is why we have implemented a range of cost of living measures. The only cost of living issue they're interested in talking about is the cost of living with each other. That's what they're interested in, Mr Speaker, and they can't shut up about it. What we're focused on is cheaper medicines, making sure people can see a doctor for free, making sure that batteries are rolled out around the country, free TAFE, getting wages up. These are all measures that we've implemented, all measures that have been opposed by those opposite. We'll continue to engage in responsible economic management. We'll continue to make sure that we deal with the pressures which are there by having a focus on cost of living measures. But those opposite, who went to the last election with higher taxes and a higher deficit over the next 2 years, can't be in a position of doing anything other than, well, I take the interjection. I take the interjection from the Leader of the Opposition. Now, it was 6 when we were elected. Now it's got a 3 in front. That's less. That's less. And we've done that. And we've done that while keeping unemployment low and getting wages up.
Order in the House comes to order. We shall hear from the honourable member for Bullwinkle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, how is the Albanese Labor government strengthening Medicare, including our public hospital systems, so Australians can access world-class quality health care they deserve? Why is it important that the government remains focused on delivering for Australians?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Bullwinkle for her question. Someone who made a difference as a nurse and is now bringing the skills that she has and knowledge of the health system into this parliament. And on Friday we signed a landmark funding agreement for our public hospitals. A landmark agreement with 3 times the increase that was there in the Morrison agreement that was done during the last decade. This will secure national access to world-class health care as well as disability supports, reducing wait times for surgery and in emergency departments, and helping long-stay patients stay out of hospital rooms and into dedicated care. Now, every Australian relies upon Medicare. That's the principle, that if you're sick, all you need is your Medicare card, not your credit card. And we know how important that is to Australians. We know how important that is. And that's why we're strengthening Medicare across the board. We promised 50 urgent care clinics, and during the last term we delivered 87. Now there are 120 of the 137 we have committed to being opened right now. We've made PBS medicines even cheaper. A script now costs just $25, the same price that it was back in 2004. And we're adding more and more essential medicines to the PBS listing. Now, that happened on the 1st of January, and on the same day, 1-800 Medicare came online. 24/7 free health advice line, making a difference already. Tens of thousands of Australians have taken advantage of that. And we're also making it easier to see a GP for free. 3,300 fully bulk billed clinics around Australia, an extra 1,300 in just a few months, far exceeding what the predictions were. Now, all of those measures are good for people's wallets, but importantly as well, they're taking pressure off the emergency departments of our hospitals, making an enormous difference. Labor created Medicare, and each and every day we're working to strengthen Medicare for all Australians. A big difference from the two sides of this chamber. We are absolutely determined that Medicare will continue to be strengthened, will continue to have more people seeing doctors with just their Medicare card, will continue to take pressure off the emergency departments of hospitals, and I thank the Premiers and Chief Ministers for their unanimous support.
Before I call the honourable member for Warringah, I'll just welcome a few guests to our parliament today. Pleased to advise that the Honourable Reece Whitby, MLA Minister for Police, Road Safety, Tourism, Great Southern, is accompanied by the Commissioner of the WA Police Force, Cole Blanche. It's good to see Queenslanders in the gallery today. From the Queensland Legislative Assembly, Mr Mark Boothman, Dr Christian Rowan and Mr Glenn Kelly MP. And also I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today are representatives from Air T who are visiting Australia from the United States following the acquisition of Rex Airlines. Give a call to the honourable member for Warringah.
The Prime Minister. In recent times, federal governments have called royal commissions into veteran suicide, aged care, anti-Semitism and social cohesion. Last year, the Prime Minister said Australia faced a domestic violence crisis, with one woman being killed every 4 days. Will the government elevate the safety of women and children to the same level of urgency and attention by calling a royal commission into femicide and domestic violence?
Give a call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Warringah for her question. I know the member for Warringah and for Kooyong and for Mackellar have written to the Prime Minister in similar terms, and I absolutely understand where they're coming from and the intent of their letter and this question. And the government absolutely agrees with the urgency of the issues that the member for Warringah is raising. But the truth is, and frontline workers will tell you this, we don't need another Royal Commission to tell us what's happening with the deaths of women in Australia and what we need to do. In fact, frontline workers have been very clear that they don't want another report. They want the implementation of the work that we're doing right now. Last year, the Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner's annual report to Parliament pointed out that we have 1,000 recommendations from at least 8 major royal commissions, inquiries and reviews. Most recently, we had the rapid review that the National Cabinet commissioned on the behest of the Prime Minister and the Premiers. We're implementing that work right now. We've had the South Australian Royal Commission most recently, the NT Coronial Inquest, many parliamentary inquiries, the Victorian Royal Commission. We need to get on with the work of implementing these recommendations, and we are. Right now, there are 583 initiatives happening around the country. 122 of those are Commonwealth-led. They're being reported on publicly. Every family violence peak body in this country released a statement that said, and I quote, "Royal Commissions have an important role in the Australian system, including gathering evidence, when we have no other way to get to the root of a problem." That is not the situation here. The evidence is clear. We know what needs to be done to prevent, respond to and help people heal from family violence. That's why this government has invested $4 billion in those 122 initiatives that I spoke about a minute ago. It's why we're working so closely with the states and territories that are responsible for policing, for courts, for the justice system and the day-to-day operation of domestic violence refuges. And it's why we're about to start the consultation on the second action plan on the National Plan on Violence Against Women and their Children. That will be a very important opportunity to say what comes next in the implementation of these recommendations. The member for Warringah and other members will have the opportunity of making contributions at that time. Frontline workers absolutely will be part of designing that second action plan, as will victims and survivors of family, domestic and sexual violence. We agree with you, the member for Warringah and the members for Kooyong and Mackellar, about the urgency of this. And I would say that every member of parliament agrees with the urgency, but we don't need more reports. We need to focus on the actions that will make a difference.
To associate your remarks with the minister, they'll be. Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the minister referenced all members of this House, and I know that all members of this House are committed to act on domestic and family violence. And I would just remind the minister of the Prime Minister and her commitment to 500 frontline domestic violence workers during the last term of Parliament. And at some point, if she could update the House.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. I reminded the Leader of the Opposition during the last sitting of Parliament not to abuse order. Order. The minister will cease interjecting. I reminded the Leader of the Opposition not to abuse the issue of indulgence, and it was crystal clear in my explanation before. She's clearly ignoring my rulings now and my advice. Indulgence is something I grant to the Leader of the Opposition on behalf of the House. I'm going to ask you again not to abuse when I grant indulgence. And I was specific that your remarks to be associated with the minister, and you ignored me on that. It's completely disrespectful to me, but it's disrespectful to the House. Give the call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management. What support measures have been activated for communities in Victoria hit by recent bushfires, and what is the outlook for the rest of the high-risk weather season?
The call to the Minister for Emergency Management, the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for Bendigo for her question. As she knows, as many people across the House and the country know, it's been a terrible start for many communities across Victoria. We've seen bushfires across the state, most recently across the Greater Otways. I was in Colac last week, where I attended the Incident Control Centre to understand the impacts of the Carlisle River blaze. I spent time in Castlemaine, in Yark, Alexandra, Euroa, Ruffy and Harcourt over the past few weeks, meeting with emergency services, local councils, businesses and, most importantly, community members. And I'd like to thank the member for Indi and the member for Nichols, who were on the ground with me to hear directly from locals about the best way that we can aid in their recovery. Residents in Ruffy told us they were worried about the local environment, including the impact on waterways, despite losing their own homes. I met with both Strathbogie and Murrindindi Shire councils in their council chambers, who reiterated the importance of building back better after a natural disaster. Through our Commonwealth State Disaster Recovery Funding arrangements, we've now committed over $330 million in response to the Victorian bushfires. This includes $158 million, which the Prime Minister announced at the State Control Centre last week. This latest funding package includes funding for clean-up, business support and advice, funding to rebuild the Harcourt Cooperative Cool Store that I visited with the Prime Minister and the member for Bendigo, repairs to public land and waterways, temporary accommodation, power outage payments for businesses, rebates to repair water tanks and mental health support. This expanded funding package is about delivering practical and respectful support that helps communities begin to rebuild with confidence. On top of that, we've got federal government payments available, including the disaster recovery payment, available to eligible residents in 57 locations. It's a one-off payment to support community members who have been most affected in this disaster. The disaster recovery allowance is income support up to 13 weeks, which is now available in 23 local government areas, as well as the Lake Mountain Alpine Resort. I want Victorians to know that we stand with you and will continue to support you. I want to also give a big thank you and a shout-out to the thousands of workers and volunteers from all over Australia, as well as New Zealand and Canada, who have been supporting firefighting efforts in Victoria. Of course, we're not out of high-risk weather season yet. Heatwave conditions may have eased, but conditions can turn really quickly. Please listen to local authorities, follow the advice of our emergency services and continue to look out for family, friends and neighbours who may be doing it tough. As a nation, we have learned a lot since the Black Summer bushfires, and we know that the three levels of government have to work collaboratively together for the benefit of our local communities, and will continue to do that.
Call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Treasurer. In 2022, the now Treasurer declared, I quote, "There are things that real leaders take responsibility for, which matter in the context of high inflation, rising interest rates, plummeting consumer confidence and falling real wages." End quote. The Treasurer is right now failing on all these same metrics, and Australians are getting poorer by the day. Treasurer, when will you start living by your own words and take responsibility?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As I've said on a number of occasions today and before that as well, I take responsibility for all aspects of my job. I take responsibility for my part and our part in the fight against inflation. I take responsibility for the fact that this government is rolling out cost of living help that those opposite opposed. I take responsibility for the fact that the budget is much, much stronger now because of our efforts, our collective efforts, than what we inherited from those opposite, Mr Speaker. I take responsibility for all aspects of my job, but more than that, we are taking action. We are taking action with cheaper medicines, with more bulk billing, with student debt relief, with free TAFE, with 2 more tax cuts opposed by those opposite after the first one also opposed by those opposite, Mr Speaker. And so I have made that clear. Take responsibility for all aspects of my job, including my part of the fight against inflation. Now, Mr Speaker, I think what makes it especially galling to get this question from those opposite, Mr Speaker, is because they left us with inflation north of 6% and absolutely galloping when we came to office. The inflation challenge peaked in 2022 because we inherited from them inflation much higher and rising. We also inherited much bigger deficits and more debt. And to make it worse, Mr Speaker, those opposite, every one of them, when they used to be in the same party before they went into their 3 separate ways, they took to the last election a policy for higher income taxes, higher electricity bills, bigger deficits and more debt. So we won't be taking lectures, Mr Speaker, from those opposite about responsible economic management. They might change their leader, Mr Speaker, but they can't change their record. They can't change the fact they left us higher and rising inflation. They left us bigger deficits and more debt. They took to the election a policy for higher taxes, higher electricity prices, bigger deficits and more debt as well, Mr Speaker. Now, what this government is doing is rolling out cost of living in a responsible way at the same time as we get the budget in much better condition than we inherited from those opposite. We delivered 2 surpluses. We found $114 billion in savings. We got the Liberal debt down. We got real wages growing for 2 years, Mr Speaker. We got inflation down from a 6 in front of it and rising, which is what we inherited from those opposites. So again, Mr Speaker, we won't be taking lectures from those opposite. They are the key reason why nobody takes them seriously on the economy anymore, a point that Peter Costello himself made when he was talking to Troy Bramston at Christmas. Mr Speaker, there are real challenges in our economy. We are focused on them. They're just focused on themselves.
The call to the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. Can the Treasurer update the House on the interest rates decision taken this afternoon by the Reserve Bank?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you the member for Adelaide for his question. Today, as expected, the Independent Reserve Bank has increased the cash rate by 25 basis points. Now, this will be difficult news for millions of Australians with a mortgage, and we understand the pressure that this puts on Australian families and businesses. Now, while today's decision was widely expected, obviously that doesn't make it any easier. We know that many Australians are doing it tough, which is why we continue to roll out responsible cost of living relief, including a further tax cut this year and another one next year, both of them opposed by those opposite. At the same time, we're doing what we can to strengthen the budget and address our long-standing productivity challenge. Now, our mid-year budget update showed the budget is more than $233 billion better than we inherited from those opposite. And part of the reason for that is $114 billion in savings since we came to office, including $20 billion in the mid-year update, Mr Speaker. Now, I want to make it really clear to the House and to people watching from home, Mr Speaker, that the statement released by the Independent Reserve Bank explaining the decision that they have taken today does not mention government spending at all. It doesn't mention government spending at all, Mr Speaker. In fact, it makes it very clear that the pressure on inflation is coming from private demand. Let me make this really clear. This is the Reserve Bank Board in their statement just released, Mr Speaker. Growth in private demand has strengthened substantially more than expected, Mr Speaker. This is the point that the Reserve Bank has made today. Pressure on inflation, the big contribution to growth in our economy, is coming from private demand and not public demand, Mr Speaker, and that is clear. And in the statement on monetary policy, which the bank has also released today, they said that the upgrade to the near-term outlook was due to stronger private demand. They said the near-term upward revision is driven by private demand and that the contribution of public demand to year-ended GDP growth has continued to ease in recent quarters, as expected, Mr Speaker. So what we've seen in our economy is public demand in retreat over the course of the last year, private demand growing strongly, and that explains the additional pressure on inflation, Mr Speaker. Now, I want to make it clear that even though inflation has moderated substantially since those opposite were in office, it is higher than we would like. We've acknowledged that since the data came out. Some of that is temporary pressures, some of that is more persistent pressures. All of that is adding to the pressures that people are feeling around the country, and that's why our cost of living relief is so important. That's why it's so important that we've got the budget in better nick than those opposite left us.
Call to the Leader of the Nationals.
My question is to the Treasurer. Treasurer, after today's interest rate hike, mortgage holders are paying more because inflation is staying higher for longer. Treasurer, when will you apologise to all mortgage holders in Australia?
Call to order. The member for Fisher will cease interjecting. Call to the Treasurer.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the leader of one of the three far-right parties in this country for his question. And I can't hear you back there. I can't hear you back there.
Order.
I can't hear you back there.
Order. Order.
I can't hear you back there.
Members on my left, there is far too much noise. I can't hear what the Treasurer is saying. The member for Lyne, the member for Lyne is not helping the situation. Treasurer will return to the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the member for his question. As I made clear a moment ago, we know that even though today's decision was expected, it doesn't make it any easier for people who are already under pressure. I think I've made that really clear. We do know, and we have said repeatedly through the course of today and before now, that we know that Australians are still under pressure despite all of the progress that we've made together in our economy. We know that Australians are still under pressure. That's why our cost of living relief is so important, and that's why it's so strange that those opposite oppose that cost of living relief. It's why our budget repair is so important, and why it's so strange that those opposite left us such a mess and now want to give us lectures about the budget position that we've spent 3.5 years cleaning up, Mr Speaker. Now, as we know, Mr Speaker, some of these inflationary pressures are temporary, some of them are more persistent. All of them are adding to the pressures that people feel in real communities. And we don't just acknowledge that, we're acting on that as a government collectively. We're acting on that with cheaper medicines and tax cuts, more bulk billing, student debt relief and the like. Now, if those opposite really cared about the pressure on people around this country, they would have supported that cost of living help. Instead, they opposed that cost of living help. And worse than that, Mr Speaker, the same people asking these questions today took to the election of policy for higher income taxes on every single Australian worker, Mr Speaker. Now, the only thing that they've been able to agree on in the course of recent months is they all desperately wanted interest rates to go up today. They all desperately wanted interest rates to go up today. It's the only thing that they can agree on right now, Mr Speaker, so they should spare us their confected outrage. Mr Speaker, they left us much higher inflation, they left us a much weaker budget, they took to the election of policy to make all of that worse, not better. This side of the House is focused on the cost of living challenge. That side of the House is focused on who sits where from one week to the next. We won't be distracted by opposition parties which are divided, divisive and in disarray.
Call to the honourable member for Braddon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. How is the Albanese Labor government focused on keeping regional communities connected in the air and on the ground? What approaches to regional Australia has the government rejected?
Call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. And can I too thank the member for Braddon for her question. As the member representing Devonport, Burnie and King Island, I know she was very pleased to meet today, as was I, with the AirT CEO, board and executives, the new owners of Rex Airlines, to further reiterate this government's commitment to regional Australia. I, like the Speaker, can I welcome AirT and Rex to the gallery today. We look forward to working with you to see you deliver the valuable service for our regional communities across this country. Our government backed Rex. We committed to keeping it flying until we could secure a buyer. And now Rex is moving on to a new chapter of regional aviation. Because of the work of this government, whether you're travelling from Moruya to Sydney, Coober Pedy to Adelaide, Monkey Mia to Perth, or in fact from the opposition benches, maybe to the crossbench, Rex will continue to get you there. Ensuring Rex kept flying is just one of the ways that we are investing in our regions to keep them connected. Back here on the ground, while the Nationals are busy playing musical chairs, we're building major infrastructure in their electorates, because someone has to actually do the job of delivering for the regions. In the former Shadow Assistant Treasurer's seat of Cowper, We're making strong progress with the Coffs Harbour Bypass, a project promised for decades, announced but not delivered, but now being delivered by federal, state Labor governments. Sorry, I can't hear you from way over there. I really can't. In the National Chief's whip seat, congratulations on keeping your role. We're not just making a record investment in improving the Bruce Highway, we're also delivering the Rocky Ring Road and upgrading key beef roads across her electorate. And while the Shadow Assistant Minister for Communications has been busy setting up SurveyMonkey surveys about the future of the coalition, we're upgrading level crossings, pushing ahead with the Western Highway upgrade from Stawell to South Australian border, upgrading the Horsham Junction and fixing bridges right the way across her electorate. And for those that do remain on those benches opposite, I know the member for Wannon now represents the acting shadow of Northern Australia. To give him an update, we're of course sealing further sections of the iconic Tanami. We're working with the Territory Government to deliver the new ship lift, and we've committed $440 million to new developed logistic hubs. We are delivering again right the way across our regions. There's a lot of work happening across the country to ensure regional communities can actually get ahead. I know it can be hard for those opposite to keep up when they're stuck in their internal party machinations. It's Labor that is the party of the bush, and we're getting on for delivering for the regions.
Give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The RBA has just confirmed the worst fears of Australians. Interest rates have risen by 0.25%, meaning the mortgage repayments of millions of Australians will rise. The Prime Minister promised that Australia had, quote, turned the corner on inflation and that his government had it, quote, under control. The Prime Minister took credit for rate cuts last year. Will he now take responsibility for the rate rise today?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. We've acknowledged, certainly, that many Australians are doing it tough. And that is why we not only have engaged in responsible economic management, turning those massive budget deficits into budget surpluses and smaller deficits going forward, why we have made sure that we've paid off some of that Liberal debt by lowering the amount of debt that is owed. It's just a fact. $176 billion.
Goldstein will cease ejecting.
And that's why,
when
we went to the election in 2025, we went to the election promising lower taxes and lower deficits than those opposite, than the shadow leader over there. Now, what we have done is continue to engage during all of that, dealing with those macroeconomic issues, whilst making sure that, because we understand that people are doing it tough, it's not enough to just express grievance. What you have to do is come up with solutions, and that is what we have done, whether it be a tax cut for every taxpayer that those opposed. They opposed at the time. Remember, before they even saw what it was, they said they were against it and they'd reverse it and they'd turn it over. They then opposed and actually went to election saying they would reverse the legislated tax cuts that come in on July 1.
The Prime Minister will pause. Order. The member for Wannon on a point of order.
Just goes to relevance, Speaker. This was a very specific question about taking responsibility for the interest rate rise.
The question was specific, but it was broad in the preamble, listing and accusing the Prime Minister of things. So I think he'll. The member for Goldstein will leave the chamber under 94A. For goodness sake. When we're trying to deal with points of order and to give the member for Wannon a fair go, chirping away is not the way to do it. So the member for Wannon's raised his point of order of relevance. I'm going to make sure the Prime Minister is being directly relevant to the question he was asked about, but it was broad in its context, and I'm asking him to return to the question.
Speaker, I note the interjections from those opposite, and they take these issues so seriously. They're playing bets on who can get thrown out of Parliament first, as the member for Goldstein leaves the chamber. The shadow manager of opposition business. And what we have done—
Order. Order. The House is going to settle down. There's far too many interjections. We're going to deal with this in an orderly way. The Prime Minister will continue to be heard in silence.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The tax cuts that were opposed by those opposite, including the one that will come in July this year and the one next year, the 15% wage increases for aged care and childcare workers that those opposite describe as waste, helping people to earn more and keep more of what they earn. We cut student debt by 20%. They said that was waste as well, making an enormous difference to 3 million Australians, making them $5,500 better off. The over 70,000 student, nurses, midwives, social workers and teachers that now actually get paid prac during their placements. The 725,000 Australians that have benefited from free TAFE. The cheaper medicines, over 200,000 cheaper home batteries that are cutting electricity bills of households. These are the measures of what a responsible government does to actually make a difference.
Time has give the call to the honourable member for Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cheaper medicines for all Australians and making life-changing medicines available on the PBS? Why is this so important after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing, the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Hunter for the question, but also his amazing work as the Special Envoy for Men's Health. He's busy lifting awareness and having honest and sometimes brutally frank conversations with Australian men about looking after themselves, really, about getting checked regularly, about seeking help if something doesn't seem quite right, and looking out for each other as well. And I'm delighted that the member has agreed to take a leading role this year in the fight against prostate cancer as well, Mr Speaker. Of course, this is Australia's most common cancer. 1 in 5 Australian men will receive a prostate cancer diagnosis at some point in their life, and although we have very, very high 5-year survival rates, around 4,000 Australian men every single year lose their battle to this cancer. On Sunday, I was delighted to announce the government's 399th new listing on the PBS, a drug called Andrega 10. It's a new combination therapy for advanced prostate cancer that has proved resistant to surgical or chemical castration, Mr Speaker. Around 2,000 men or more will have access to this medicine, including Charles Abdillah, a terrific 84-year-old who joined us at the announcement at the Royal Adelaide Hospital on Sunday. And before Sunday, this new combination therapy would have cost around $900 per script, or $10,000 a year. Now it will be available to those 2,000 men at just affordable PBS prices, Mr Speaker. And as the member for Hunter knows, we've been busy ever since we were elected making those PBS scripts cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. In our first few months in government 3 years ago, we slashed the maximum amount that pensioners and concession card holders would pay for all of their medicines needs in a given year by 25%. And since then, pensioners and concession card holders have received an additional 87.5 million scripts completely free of charge, scripts they otherwise would have had to pay for, saving them hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Finally, we delivered 60-day scripts for hundreds of common medicines, saving patients more time and even more money, Mr Speaker. And as the Prime Minister has already said, last month we delivered another huge cut to the maximum price of PBS scripts, lowering it to just $25, the same level it was way back in 2004. And for pensioners and concession card holders, we haven't just frozen their medicine prices this year, we've frozen them for the rest of the decade, Mr Speaker. When we came to government, 1 million Australians were saying they weren't having scripts filled that their doctor has said was important for their health because of cost. These cheaper medicines policies are changing that equation. It's good for their hip pocket, but it's also good, Mr Speaker, for our nation's health.
With a call to the Deputy Leader of the Nationals.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm assuming you can hear me. My question is to the Treasurer. AMP Chief Economist Shane Oliver and many other economists have warned that record government spending is adding to inflationary pressures and keeping prices higher for longer. Treasurer, why is this government making Australians pay more for mortgages, groceries, fuel and electricity?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To deal with those parts of the question in reverse order, the inflation was running much higher when he was in government than under us, but the substantive part of the question.
Order. The member for Page has asked his question, so we're just going to show each other respect.
Right,
Treasurer, order the
government.
Treasurer return to the question.
Thank
Treasurer
you.
return to the question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I'm asked about the views of economists about what's contributing to the inflation pressures which are in our economy. Let me read you 3 examples of economists who have pointed out, as has the Reserve Bank today, that the pressure on the economy, the upward revision, is because of faster than expected private demand, at the same time as public demand is taking a back seat, actually retreating. And so I give Diana Messina from AMP said just this morning, quoting, "Government spending has peaked and the growth in government spending is going to add less to inflation." Belinda Allen from the Commonwealth Bank, quote, "The public sector's contribution to growth has eased significantly." Lucy Ellis from Westpac, quote, "Public sector demand growth is slowing and indeed was negative over the first half of 2025. Now, Mr Speaker, if the honourable member doesn't want to take those economists' word for it, I acknowledge that there are, as always in the economist profession, contested views about these sorts of things. I encourage him to read the Reserve Bank statement today. Because what that makes it clear is that the pressure on inflation is coming from private demand. And I know that it's terribly embarrassing for the member who wrote this question before the statement came out, but the statement's made it really clear where the pressure is coming from, and so does the statement on monetary policy. And so I encourage him to check that out. He should have read that before he asked the question, but in the absence of that, now is as good a time as any. Economists have got a range of views about the contribution that's being made to inflation, but the Reserve Bank has made their view very clear.
Give the call to the member for Bean.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Education. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to provide real cost of living relief to Australians and support them to get a university degree? Why is it so important to continue to deliver rather than divide when it comes to education?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend the brilliant member for Bean for his question. Mr Speaker, I might just do that. I told the Parliament in November last year that we've cut the student debt
Members on my left,
by 20% of 1.5 million Australians. But I can inform the House that that is not correct, at least not anymore, because now it's double that. Now we've cut the student debt of more than 3 million Australians by 20%. We promised it, now we've delivered it. It's the biggest cut to student debt in Australian history. To put it in perspective, for the average Australian with a student debt, we've taken now $5,500 off their back. And that's a lot of help for a lot of young Australians who might be just out of TAFE or just out of university, maybe just out of home. They're just getting started. And, Mr Speaker, this isn't the only thing that we're doing. We're also cutting the amount that they have to repay of their debt every year. So, for example, if you're on $70 grand a year, we're cutting the amount that you have to repay every year by $1,300. Now, that's real cost of living help. It means an extra $1,300 in your pocket rather than the government's. And there's something else that we're doing to help Australians with the cost of living, and that's paid prac, financial help while you do your practical training at university. Because, as many people do, if you have to give up your part-time job to do your practical training, or you've got to move a couple of 100 kilometres away and rent, then it can be tough to pay the bills. And that's why we're doing this. It's real cost of living help, and we're now rolling that out too for teaching students, for nursing students, for midwifery students and for social work students. People who've signed up to do some of the most important jobs in this country, like looking after our kids and looking after us when we're ill and when we're old, women fleeing domestic violence. And, Mr Speaker, that's what we're focused on, helping Australians with the cost of living, unlike those on the other side who are just focused on how much they hate each other. Mr Speaker, they make the Beckhams look like a happy family. They're like a couple who bought a non-refundable holiday and then they broke up, and now they've just got to sit there and suffer through it. Mr Speaker, they don't like paid prac, they don't like cutting student debt by 20%, and, Mr Speaker, they don't even like each other.
Order. Member for Fisher. Give the call to the honourable. Order. When the House comes to order. We'll hear from the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Treasurer. Scores of economists have linked higher inflation and interest rates to this government's spending spree. Former Treasury Assistant Secretary David Pearl said the Treasurer is, quote, squarely to blame for the inflation mess we are in, end quote, while IFM Investors Chief Economist Alex Joyner said, quote, the fiscal guardrails have come off, end quote. Treasurer, as mortgage holders are hit with their 13th interest rate rise under Labor, will you now finally take responsibility?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. One of the problems with them not talking to each other over there is that his mate over there just asked the same question. Essentially the same question, Mr Speaker. And so,
the Deputy Leader
at least when they used to talk to each other, they could work out who asks what, Mr Speaker, instead of wasting two questions on the same one. But anyway, Mr Speaker.
Which capacity did he ask?
Order. The Treasurer reports that the member for Lindsay and the member for Fairfax have had good goes, so we're just going to cool it. I'm going to hear from the Treasurer.
Thank you. I thank the Shadow Treasurer, Mr Speaker, who is also now, I'm told, the Shadow Assistant Treasurer. They found the only bloke over there who could work with him, Mr Speaker, and they're still not convinced there won't be leaking of private conversations. Now, Mr Speaker, as I said a moment ago to his colleague, there are a number of economists who have pointed out, as have the Reserve Bank today in coming to their decision, that the uptick in inflation, the pressure on the outlook, is coming from private demand. I remind him again, Diana Messina from AMP, government spending has peaked and the growth in government spending is going to add less to inflation. Belinda Allen from the Commonwealth Bank, the public sector's contribution to growth has eased significantly. Lucy Ellis from Westpac, public sector demand growth is slowing and indeed was negative over the first half of 2025. They couldn't be clearer, Mr Speaker. There are a number of economists who have pointed out, as have the Reserve Bank today, that what's happened with the inflation outlook is an upside surprise in private demand, not public spending. Now, the Shadow Treasurer and Shadow Assistant Treasurer should also know, now that the statement has been out for almost half an hour, that the Reserve Bank Board itself has said the pressure is coming from private demand. So, a bit like his friend earlier on, I encourage him to read the Reserve Bank statement that they put out. Similarly, the statement of monetary policy makes it clear that the pressure is coming from private demand, not public demand. Now, on the last part of his question,
the Deputy Leader of the Nationals will cease interjecting.
On the last part of his question, Mr Speaker, about taking responsibility, I think in the first answer today I made it really clear. I take responsibility for all parts of my job. I take responsibility for playing a helpful role in this fight against inflation, and I remind the House. That one of those things I take responsibility for is cleaning up the mess that was left to us by those opposite, who had inflation higher than 6% and absolutely roaring. The same people who had bigger deficits, never delivered a surplus, didn't show spending restraint, took to the election a policy for higher income taxes, bigger deficits and more debt. Of all of the people that I would take a lecture from on responsible economic management, not one of the three far-right parties over there would be on the list.
Give a call to the honourable member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cost-of-living relief to Australian workers, and what could put workers' wages at risk?
Call to the Minister for Employment and the Minister for Workplace Relations.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Dunkley for that question and also her passionate advocacy for workers in her electorate, but right across the country. Now, the Albanese Labor government was elected on a commitment to help working Aussies with the cost of living by getting their wages moving again, and we are delivering. One way we are boosting wages is through reinvigorating enterprise bargaining. And now we're seeing the evidence of these reforms delivering. New data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics shows that wages of workers covered by enterprise agreements have risen by an average of 9.6% over 2 years. And of course, under our government, we've reached record high numbers of workers on enterprise agreements, and these workers are earning more. Now, in reporting on this ABS data, the Australian newspaper pointed out workers on enterprise agreements are pocketing the biggest pay increases across all pay-setting methods. This is good news for Aussie workers and evidence that our reforms are delivering. Now, Speaker, I'm asked about whether there are any risks, and there are. While this government is focusing on delivering higher wages, there are significant risks when it comes to the pay packet of Aussie workers, and it exists across the chamber. We've seen those opposite in absolute chaos over the last few weeks, squabbling over who gets the top job, who's in charge, focused only on themselves. However, the truth is, when it comes to Australians' wages and conditions, it doesn't matter who leads the Liberal Party, doesn't matter who's in the top job, regardless of whether the Nationals are in or out, those opposite will always look to cut the wages and conditions of Australians. And we know this because they have a long history under many, many leaders. We have the introduction of work choices. We have the economic architecture of keeping wages low as a deliberate design feature when they were last in government. They refused to protect penalty rates, promised to rip away work from home rights and opposed every single one of our government's changes to get wages moving. And it continues. Even in the midst of this confusion and chaos, on the other side, just yesterday, Senators Sharma, Hume and Bragg reminded us there is something that unites them, and that is attacking workers. It is still on their agenda, and it doesn't matter who leads. Well, while those opposite remain absolutely divided and wallow in their confusion and chaos, our government is laser-focused on getting wages moving and delivering for Australians.
Call to the member for Ryan.
Speaker, question to the Prime Minister. Australia's billionaires increased their wealth by almost $30 million a day in the last year, according to a new Oxfam report. They now hold more wealth than the bottom 40% of the population combined, while everyday Australians struggle to get ahead. Will your government implement a billionaire's wealth tax so that all Australians have what they need to live a good life?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Ryan for her question, and indeed inequality in Australia is an issue of which this government is focused, and the member is, I think, reflecting a view that many Australians would have when they look at the extraordinary growth in wealth at the very top end, and the fact that for many Australians they are doing it tough. And that is an issue which is absolutely critical. But that's one of the reasons why our focus when it comes to tax cuts was to, you might recall, and I'm sure the member voted for it, to change the stage 3 tax cuts to make sure whilst lifting that top rate from $180,000 to $190,000 in which it cuts in, we made sure that we took the same amount, around about $106 billion, and we redistributed it to people who really needed that tax cut. And of course it was opposed by the Liberal Party and the National Party at that time. But that's why as well, when we were discussing in the lead-up to last year's budget with the Treasurer and the Finance Minister, okay, how can we help people? Our focus was on lowering that first marginal tax rate down 15-14, to lower that down so that we targeted in to people who really needed it, the action. The other thing that we have done, of course, is to make sure that we have provided government support through measures like the back-to-back rental assistance for the first-time increases for more than 1 million households. Tens of thousands of older Australians are receiving a higher rate of job seeker. 1.1 million Australians are benefiting from higher social security payments. That's why we've as well made sure that 1.2 million people on low incomes continue to pay no or a reduced Medicare levy. And the other thing that we have done is to change the listo for people in retirement to benefit more than 1.3 million Australians. But in addition to the tax cuts, one of the things that we took to the election and that will take place is the automatic refund, so that those people who don't benefit from using accountants or trying to minimise their tax will get that automatic kickback in their bank accounts because of the system that we have put in place. In addition to that, of course, gender equity has been a big focus, so measures such as paying super on paid parental leave, closing the gender pay gap, lifting the wages of people in aged care and childcare, all of these measures as well have been aimed at tackling inequality. That's something that the Australian Labor Party was formed to do, and it's something that my government is absolutely committed to.
Give the call to the member for Petrie.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Communications. What has been the impact of the Albanese Labor government's social media age restrictions so far, and how is this policy helping to protect young Australians from the harm of social media?
Call to the Minister for Communications and the Minister for Sport.
I thank the member for Petrie for her question and for introducing me to the students at the glorious Humpy Bong State School on the 9th of December last year, just 24 hours before the ban hit, to talk about what their life was going to look like in just 24 hours. And on the 10th of December, Mr Speaker, Australia's online culture changed for the better. On the 10th of December, parents, teachers, carers, kids and government stood shoulder to shoulder against the social media giants. On the 10th of December, we sent a clear message to big tech to let Australian kids be kids. And in the first week of Australia's world-leading social media law, Mr Speaker, 4.7 million accounts were deactivated, removed or restricted. 4.7 million accounts in the first week. That is a result to celebrate. Mr Speaker, if you average that number, 4.7 million across all of our 151 electorates, it works out to 31,125 accounts in each of our electorates, in electorates like Petrie or Banks or Bass. Though, despite our best efforts, and I try to deactivate these accounts as quickly as possible, there are a number of accounts that still remain very, very active in particular electorates, Mr Speaker. Social media accounts that remain very, very active in Hume and in Wannon and in Lindsay. Nonetheless, we can't catch them all, but we will keep working on this because implementation, we know, will not be perfect, but it will be really important. And every social media account that we deactivate is an extra opportunity for young Australians to make a connection in real life, to play sport, to listen to music, to learn an instrument or to read a book from the library. They can discover and learn who they are before these social media platforms assume who they are. And they get a bit of a reprieve from the algorithms, from the endless scroll, the constant notifications and the pressure to get likes. Australian parents can be confident that their kids can have their childhood back And I've heard from kids, teachers, parents and carers right across the country who proudly back this law. One email that resonates was from a parent and educator who wrote, "Watching my daughter play with her younger siblings recently, I caught myself imagining the world that she might inherit because of the decisions that you've made." This is what these changes are doing, helping kids build real-world connections. This is an incredible Australian story. It is about delivering cultural change that will take time. We don't expect implementation to be perfect, but we expect progress and continuous improvement, and we will hold social media companies accountable.
Call to the member for Clark.
Prime Minister, it is well established that the opposition is the party or the group which has the most non-government members in the House of Representatives. Seeing as the crossbench is now as big as the Liberal Party and likely to soon exceed them with more defections, on what basis are the Libs still regarded as the opposition and enjoying the perks that go with it?
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. Prime Minister has the call.
I thank the member for Clark for his question, and indeed we have noticed the changes that have occurred in this chamber and that what has been going on over recent weeks while we have been rolling out the cost of living measures and doing deals with states and territories to improve hospital funding and going to South Australia for the first of the new housing agreements, helping 17,000 new homes be built, 7,000 of which are reserved for first home buyers, is that those opposite have been solely focused on themselves. Now, I used to get admonished sometimes by the Speaker by using the term no-alition. I meant it as a joke, but they've regarded it as a mission statement. This is a mission statement, those opposite as they go through. They're fighting each other with the same sort of energy that they used to reserve for fighting our cost of living measures, Mr Speaker, as they go through. Now, we will continue to focus on government with regard to the issues that he raises. I'll wait and see what happens. I have said I'll have respectful discussions, including respectful discussions with the Leader of the Opposition, because I think that's appropriate. I am very much a traditionalist when it comes to well, order. OK, you won't come to the meeting. Oh, don't bring him. But when it comes to the traditions of this chamber,
order. Members
a long
on my
period
left, the
of
member
time,
for Gippsland is warned.
I will, and perhaps the Leader of the Nat shouldn't bring the member for Gippsland either, because the fact is that there are representations being made to me about a range of issues. I will treat those representations respectfully, because I think it's important that this parliament is able to function in an appropriate way.
Yeah. Hear from the honourable member for Sturt.
Yeah. Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering more urgent care clinics across the country? Why is it important for Australians to be able to access urgent care when they need it, after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, and to the member for Sturt. She's still in her first year, but she's already making a terrific contribution in this place and great representation of her community in the eastern suburbs of Adelaide. Particularly on health, she brings really valuable insights, Mr Speaker, from her time as a board director of the Royal Flying Doctor Service. And she's already delivered on the commitment she made to open a Medicare urgent care clinic in Norwood, Mr Speaker. It opened on the 17th of December. It's in the heart of her community on the parade there in Norwood, and it's already seen hundreds and hundreds of patients, Mr Speaker, like Hermione Farmer's daughter. Ms Farmer wrote online about her experience. She said, My daughter used the walk-in Medicare clinic at Norwood on New Year's Eve, Mr Speaker, and it's pretty hard to find a GP clinic open. She said it was great. She got the high quality of care that she needed in a timely fashion without sitting around in emergency for hours, Mr Speaker. That was the promise that the member for Sturt made, and it's just one of 122 Medicare urgent care clinics that right now are open, Mr Speaker, with another 15 clinics opening in coming weeks, Mr Speaker. They're all open 7 days a week, Mr Speaker, 365 days a year, extended hours, and already they've seen 2.5 million patients, Mr Speaker. A third of those patients children under the age of 15, and a third of them were seen on weekends, where they'd find it very difficult to get into their usual general practice. And importantly, Mr Speaker, every single one of those patients have been fully bulk billed. All they needed was their Medicare card, Mr Speaker. Once this is fully up and running, the network will see 2 million patients.
The Minister will pause. I'm up to 11 interjections by the member for Lyons, so she won't make 12. She'll leave the chamber now. Just wait for the member for Lyons to leave the chamber. Minister will continue.
Thank you, Speaker. Once fully up and running, this network will see 2 million patients every single year, not just delivering high-quality urgent care free of charge, all you need is a Medicare card, but importantly taking pressure off our busy emergency department, something the Prime Minister talked to the Premiers and Chief Ministers about on Friday. All of this is why Australians know what they get from the Labor Party when it comes to Medicare, Speaker. But after a decade of cuts and neglect, the alternative's still not very clear at all. Of course, the Leader of the Opposition's got a pretty infamous record on Medicare from her time as Health Minister. The member for Canning, I'm not sure, has ever mentioned the word Medicare in this place. And as for the great pretender to the throne, the member for Hume, who inexplicably remains on the front bench, Mr Speaker, a man with no apparent honour at all, plotting against his leader from the front bench, well, he described our Medicare investments as wasteful spending.
Order. The Minister will pause. Order. Members on my right. The Minister for Social Services, the Minister for Workplace Relations will cease rejecting the manager on a point of order.
On relevance, the Minister is not being relevant to the question he was asked, and he's not referring to members by their correct titles.
Order. On the point of order, the Leader of the House.
To the point of order, I'd say two things. One, the Minister was clearly, from the way that question was framed, able to give the comments that he gave. And secondly, I note the member for Hume never claimed to be misrepresented.
Order. The manager.
Well, if that's okay, I can refer to the Manager of Opposition and also a pretender to the throne. That would be in order. That would be his title, if that's what he's saying is in order.
Look, the manager. Order. I'll deal with this. The Manager of Opposition Business is correct. I'm agreeing with him. I want all members. He's entitled to raise a point of order. We're not getting into a situation. He has a job to do, and everyone has a role to play in this parliament. He's entitled to raise a point. He did that. All members have got to be referred to by their correct titles. And I just ask everyone to temper their language. I want everyone to show each other respect. So let's just answer the questions. Let's ask the questions, get the answers, and keep moving. Minister for Health.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My point is, on this side you'll get work for a stronger Medicare. On that side you get Hobson's choice.
The call to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Today, the Prime Minister's hand-picked Secretary of the Treasury, Jenny Wilkinson, joined every other RBA board member in voting to raise interest rates. When Labor spends, Australians pay. Prime Minister, what does it say about Labor's economic incompetence when its own Treasury Secretary is voting to lift rates?
Order. Members on my right. The Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think it reflects a level of desperation on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition that she would go after a wonderful public servant in the way that she just has. Now, the Treasury Secretary, under governments of both political persuasions, attends these board meetings as a representative of the Treasury, not the Treasurer, not the government, and they play an important and a meaningful role there. They did when you were in office, when they were in office, Mr Speaker, and they do now. And I think it is entirely inappropriate for those opposite to try to drag into this one of the finest public servants that this country has ever seen. And I think especially to do it on the day, Mr Speaker, when we've appointed Sarah Court to be the chair of ASIC, which means that under this government, this Prime Minister and this Cabinet, for the first time in the history of 4 major economic institutions in this country, they're led by women. The Treasury for the first time in our history, ASIC for the first time in our history, Productivity Commission for the first time in our history, the Reserve Bank for the first time in our history. We are proud of the appointments that we have made and the progress that we have made, and those opposite shouldn't try to diminish, as they just have, a very fine public servant.
Very definitely. Order. Order. Members on my right, when the House comes to order, we won't be doing anything until the House comes to order. So I'd like to hear from the honourable member for Bennelong, who's now on his.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government getting on with the job of building cleaner, cheaper energy? Why is focusing on the need of Australian families important, and what are the risks to delivering the reliable, fair and modern energy grid Australians deserve?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for the question, and as a fierce advocate for cheaper and more reliable renewable energy, I'm happy to give the member for Bennelong and the House a progress report since we last sat. Mr Speaker, we've seen the December quarter figures, and we saw record energy demand in Australian history in December quarter, and we saw the grid cope very well. We saw 24 gigawatts worth of demand.
Order.
And because of renewables hitting 51%, for the first time in Australian history, the grid cope well, 52% in Western Australia. NEM emissions, National Energy Market emissions, the lowest they've ever been, and no coincidence, wholesale prices down 44% in the quarter, renewables up, reliability up, prices down and emissions down, and that is no coincidence. Now, Mr Speaker, an important part of that story is home batteries.
Order.
And I'm pleased to report to the House that we have now installed 218,023 home batteries. And as I've said to the House before, this is very much a rural and regional and outer suburban story. Taking some electorates at random, Mr Speaker, the member for Hume is doing very well. In his electorate, we've seen 2,404 home batteries installed, which is more than the electorates of Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane combined in the electorate of Hume. He's way ahead of the member for Farrer on numbers. In Farrer, we've seen 1,862 home batteries installed, which is good, but behind the member for Hume. And he's also in front of the member for Canning on 1,986 batteries. The member for Canning has conceded he's unlikely to take top spot when it comes to batteries, Mr Speaker. And in the National Party, I'm pleased to report the member for Flynn has beaten the member for Maranoa for the first time this week on 1,128 batteries compared to the member for Maranoa's 922 batteries. But perhaps reports of a comeback by the member for Riverina have something in them, because he's blitzing it, Mr Speaker. 2,390 batteries in the Riverina. I was pleased to visit Wagga Wagga before Christmas to visit some of those batteries. And in New South Wales, Mr Speaker, the member for Mitchell's been very busy on the numbers. We've seen Mitchell install 2,889 batteries, the highest in New South Wales. I was pleased to visit the Litchfields with the Attorney-General just a couple of weeks ago, very pleased with their home battery. He's in front of the member for Lindsay, who has also good numbers. The member for Lindsay has expressed an aspiration to lead, but she's got some catching up to do. She's installed 1,592 batteries in Lindsay, which I read is about 1,591 more than leadership votes she has in any proposed ballot. So, Mr Speaker, while those opposite concentrate on rolling each other we continue to concentrate on rolling out batteries, rolling out renewable energy, rolling out cheaper, more reliable energy, because that's what the Australian people want.
It's the crossbench. Give the call to the member for Bradfield.
My question is for the Prime Minister. Parliament has passed laws to combat anti-Semitism, hate and extremism, but legislative leaders are one of a myriad of responses required to prevent terror attacks of the type that we saw in Bondi. You've called for a Royal Commission, but what are the other steps to address the underlying cultural, social and economic factors which contribute to extremism? Will you commit to adequately resourcing the implementation of a national anti-racism framework, a comprehensive strategy commissioned by your government and released in November 2024?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Bradfield for her question. Indeed, we do need to deal with a comprehensive response, not just to anti-Semitism, but to building social cohesion as well. I think the attack that we saw in Perth is an example of something that the authorities are dealing with. I'll be meeting with the WA Commissioner, who was in the chamber earlier today, along with the AFP Commissioner, to be briefed on that at a later time, because that was a very serious incident that is being looked at being designated to be an act of terrorism, and the authorities are looking at that indeed, and having been received a preliminary briefing, I think it is quite extraordinary that there wasn't a much more serious consequences of what occurred there in Perth. Anti-Semitism requires constant vigilance. It requires us to— we brought forward the legislation, of course, before the Parliament, and it is a fact that there was a considerable advance through legislating not just on guns but on hate speech. It didn't go as far as the envoy on anti-Semitism's report recommended, but nonetheless it did. It was a significant advance forward, and I thank all those who voted for that legislation in both the House and the Senate. We'll continue to engage across the board on these issues. We have, the member refers to extremism and to issues breaking down social cohesion. We have had incidents as well of sovereign citizens or so-called sovereign citizens being involved in the murder of police officers in Victoria and Queensland. There are a range of threats that are very real, including, of course, a number of incidents that have been publicised before the court involving myself and members of Parliament indeed. I think we need a broader conversation as a society as well about the impact of polarisation, the impact, as I've said, about social media pushing people towards more and more extremes down these rabbit holes, the fact that as well clickbait. Well, there's 2 seconds.
The member for just give the call to the member for Bradfield.
Relevance. The question was specifically around the resourcing.
The Prime Minister's concluded his answer. The time is concluded. The call to the member for Deakin.
My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How is the Albanese Labor government's policy of free TAFE supporting Australians to get the skills they want and need? And are there any threats to the future of free TAFE?
Call to the Minister for Skills and the Minister for Training.
Thanks, Speaker, and thank you to the member for Deakin for his question. Every day in this place we see what a wise decision the people of Deakin made last May. He came to this place having been a teacher and saw firsthand the power of education changing people's lives. And he knows, as we all do on this side of the House, that Labor is the party of education and the party of training. And we're the party of TAFE too, which is why I'm so excited to be celebrating the 3rd birthday of free TAFE. Yeah. And, Speaker, there's much to celebrate. 725,000 enrolments in courses that are building that pipeline of workers Australia needs, whether it's nurses, construction workers, tech workers, early childhood educators and so many more. And there are already 210,000 courses which have been completed, with plenty more to come. Now, to celebrate the 3rd birthday, I had the opportunity to catch up with some students, past and present, and to hear about how free TAFE has helped set them up for their futures. And in particular, I heard from Ryan from Croydon in the Deakin electorate, who started his working life as a trade apprentice but was injured. And he told me at this stage, even though he wasn't earning because of this injury, free TAFE meant that he could actually, in his words, give it a shot and see if he enjoyed this change of course. And now, thanks to his Cert 4 in cyber, he's got a job in that field and is really contributing to Australia's future, one of near 70,000 enrolments in tech and digital courses, playing their part in helping Australians navigate the online world and keep others stay safe. So when students say free TAFE has been life-changing, those of us in this place should listen. And on that note, the member also asked me about the future of free TAFE and risks. And I can say to everyone on this side of the House, the future is secure. More Australians under us can do what Ryan has done and set themselves up for life. But those opposite, who used to be in coalition, haven't been listening to people like Ryan. They're too busy arguing amongst themselves. But they can agree on one thing, that they hate free TAFE. The Leader of the Opposition thinks Australians don't value it, and they would cut free TAFE, and with it the benefits that hundreds of thousands of Australians have seen. So let me be very clear about this. This Albanese government will always stand up for free TAFE. Yeah. Australians have sent a really clear message the last 2 elections. They back free TAFE. That's why we legislated for free TAFE. Starting next year, it will be permanent, so Australians right around the country can continue to get skills they want to do the jobs we need.
Yeah. Call to the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Treasurer. In announcing today the 13th interest rate rise under Labor, the Reserve Bank said in its official statement that, and I quote, "Inflation is likely to remain above target for some time." In light of this, can the Treasurer rule out future rate rises this year?
Member for Isaacs. Give a call to the Treasurer.
You'd think by now, Mr Speaker, that the Shadow Treasurer would know that the Reserve Bank takes its decisions independent of government.
Order. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has asked his question.
And I can hear them interjecting over there, Mr Speaker, including the member for Hume. But when we took steps to make the Reserve Bank even more independent, the member for Hume supported us until everyone else rolled him, and then they opposed us, Mr Speaker. So he doesn't come to this with a heap of credibility when it comes to Reserve Bank independence. Now, as I said before in the answer to an earlier question, I have responsibilities when it comes to managing the budget, rolling out the cost of living, working with these colleagues to make sure that we play a helpful role in this really important fight against inflation. We have different responsibilities to the Independent Reserve Bank. The Shadow Treasurer really should know that by now. He's been in the role for a little while. And so we've got different responsibilities, but we've got the same objective. We need to get on top of this inflation challenge in our economy. We need to do that in a way that doesn't sacrifice too many jobs, Mr Speaker, and that's the task that the Reserve Bank independently and the government separately are engaged in. Now, Mr Speaker, if the Shadow Treasurer wants to refer to the statement put out by the Reserve Bank a little while ago, he should concede that this whole campaign that they've been running up to today, and they've been desperately hoping for a rate rise today, in saying that the Reserve Bank was terribly concerned about public spending, they need to admit now that that was rubbish. Because if you look at the Reserve Bank statement today, it doesn't mention government spending. It's not a factor in the decision that they took today. In fact, they've gone out of their way to say that the upside surprise in inflation and the pressure on the outlook is coming from private demand. Now, these aren't my opinions on their own, Mr Speaker. They are now in the statement issued by the Independent Reserve Bank, Mr Speaker. Now, if those opposite want to pretend now, that government set interest rates, well, that is obviously dishonest. Of course we don't. But we do work as hard as we can to get on top of inflation, to roll out this cost of living relief, because we do understand that people are under pressure. But more than acknowledge that, we are acting on that. And if those opposite really cared about cost of living pressures, they would have supported our tax cuts, they would have supported our cost of living relief, they wouldn't have left us a mess in the budget, they wouldn't have taken to the election a policy for higher taxes, bigger deficits and more debt. Now, Mr Speaker, those opposite spent the end of last year trying to divide the country. They've spent the start of this year trying to divide themselves, and now they want the Australian people to believe all of a sudden they care about the cost of living. Only this side of the House does.
Yeah. Call to the honourable member for Holt.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitment to strengthen paid parental leave? What approaches has the government been asked to consider?
The call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and thanks so much to the member for Holt for her question. I know she's a huge supporter of paid parental leave, and it was lovely to see baby Ilya again growing up so quickly yesterday. Mr Speaker, before the Rudd and Gillard governments, Australia was one of the very few developed nations that had no paid parental leave scheme. Labor started paid parental leave and we are expanding it. And from the 1st of July this year, we will expand it again. Families will get the benefits of a full 6 months of paid parental leave. Under this Prime Minister, paid parental leave, people who are receiving paid parental leave are already $12,000 better off. Just since 2022, we have almost doubled paid parental leave since coming to government. 180,000 families are benefiting from our changes. Our changes mean more time, the full 6 months, more money, higher payments, and also, of course, superannuation on paid parental leave, more flexibility, more time for mum and dad to take off together, more people eligible as well. And, of course, when they go back to work, mums and dads get cheaper childcare as well, saving thousands. Of course, those opposite have not been clear on paid parental leave, not ever. It was, in fact, the former Treasurer who called mothers double dippers. On Mother's Day, it was former Prime Minister Scott Morrison who called them rorters. And when those opposite tried to introduce their own scheme, the member for Mitchell called it unaffordable and unsustainable and an albatross around the neck of the party. And the member for Goldstein, he said, to me, it's a very bad scheme. It's not my choice that women have children. It's genetic. They have always been a mess on paid parental leave. And if we needed a reminder, we had a tragic reminder of that during the debate on Baby Priya's bill, when we had the members for Canning, the member for Bowman, the member for Barker hijack the debate on Baby Priya's bill. While the Liberals and the Nationals have always been ambivalent about paid parental leave, we are absolutely clear on this side. We support new families, we support new parents, we support this investment. We are delivering, they are in disarray.
Yeah. Call to the honourable member for Nichols.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How many Australians received the $275 reduction in their energy bill that Labor promised by the end of last year?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for Nichols for his question. And I say 218,000 Australian families have reduced their energy bills to very close to zero or are getting a rebate now because of the Albanese government's cheaper home batteries policy, and every single Australian saw wholesale prices fall by 44% in the last quarter of last year. We have more work to do to make sure that flows through to retail prices, Mr Speaker, and we intend to keep that work up. The member for Hume promised that wholesale prices would be $70 a megawatt hour. They were $341 when he left office in 2022, Mr Speaker. So that's the track record of the member for Hume. And in Victoria, the wholesale price of electricity in May 2022 was $233 a megawatt hour. It is today $37 a megawatt hour.
Call order. 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 When the House comes to order, the member for Gippsland. The member for Hume, when I'm settling the House, it would be greatly assistance if you could help me with that. Give the call to the honourable member for Solomon.
Thanks, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister inform the House about his recent visit to Timor-Leste and explain why building our partnerships, Australia's partnerships in our region, is so important?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Solomon for his question, and of course he served in Timor-Leste as well with the Australian Defence Force, but also has an important relationship with the people of East Timor, including its leaders as well. And one of the things that strikes you very clearly when you visit Timor-Leste is the respect that members of the Australian Defence Force and others who provided support for them over a period of time for their struggle of independence and since then are held. Last week, that was the first time I had visited as Prime Minister, and there was a very warm reception from President Ramos Horta and Prime Minister Guzmão. I was honoured to address the National Parliament, and we spoke of our shared history but also our shared future, the deep bond between our two nations. Of course, that bond was forged during World War II, where when Australian troops were there fighting for the defence of our nation in our darkest hour, the people of East Timor provided extraordinary support, and 50,000 lives were lost as a direct result of the fact that the Timorese were there side by side with Australian diggers. Many Australians were captured and imprisoned by the Japanese during that struggle, including my mentor, Tom Uren, during that period. After the 1999 independence referendum and again in 2006, Australia stepped up to secure peace and democracy in Timor-Leste. And our historic bonds are important, and now we look towards our nation's shared future. We proudly supported Timor-Leste's ascension to ASEAN last year, the 11th nation to be given full membership. And together we signed with Prime Minister Xanana Gusmão a Passeria, a new partnership for a new era, an updated security agreement focused on cooperation. This is a relationship between equal partners based on mutual respect, and I thank Timor-Leste for the honour that I was given while I was there, which I received on behalf of Australia as well. My visit to Indonesia on Thursday will also be an important step engaging in our region. These relationships are so important for Australia. The new alliance with Papua New Guinea, the treaty that we will sign with President Prabowo on Friday in Indonesia, the Passeria with Timor-Leste, the upgraded relationship in our region is critical. In a turbulent world, we have a crucial role as a middle power, bringing nations together, advocating for our shared interests, building a region and a world where sovereignty is respected and where the economic potential of our nation and our region is fulfilled, always working in the national interest to make a positive difference in the lives that we serve and represent the Australian people. I look forward to visiting Indonesia later this week, and I thank very much President Ramos Horta and Prime Minister Gusmao for the very warm reception. They are both very good and dear friends of Australia. And on that note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.